The recording has started. Thank you guys very much for joining. Thank you guys and ladies. Tom Long and Randy Pobst, who you can see on your screen, are your professional driver coaches for tonight's Behind the Zoom web forum. The forum is being recorded. My name is David Cook. I'm the Business Development Manager for Mazda Motorsports. Tonight's forum is designed to assist you with preparation for the prestigious Atlanta Region SCCA American Road Race of Champions, the ARC event for this weekend. However, everyone is encouraged to participate as advice and tips will be transferable to all the tracks that hopefully you and your friends do compete at. Q&A is highly regarded as a very positive forum. I know that when Randy, for instance, will be speaking, Tom will be able to answer questions by typing. So just wanted to do a quick test here. Everybody should be able to see a questions box in their control panel. If you can open it and just, I see Paul has found it. That's great. Thank you. Just type something. We got all your information as far as what cars and classes that you're competing in, but perhaps you could even add that, what car and class you're competing in. It looks like we've got some people figuring out, which is great. As far as our drivers, a little bit more about them. Tom Long is a Mazda factory driver, as many of you know, in driving the number 70 Skyactiv D prototype, and he's a professional driver coach. Randy Pobst is also one of our drivers. He's a 4-time World Challenge GT champion, 2-time Rolex 24 at Daytona winner, and factory driver in an MX-5 for Freedom Autosport, which he plugged earlier, and in the Continental Tire Sports Car Challenge Street Tuner class. The Behind the Zoom campaign, for those who don't know, but I think if you're here, you probably do. It's a series of segments where 12 of our Mazda factory drivers and champions come together to break down many of the tracks that you'll go to. So that'll include providing data, setup guides, or tips and tricks, breakdown of the corners, the line, and anything else that they feel is helpful. Of course, video is always beneficial, so we have onboard camera shots from many of them. Tom Long will be the one that provided his onboard for tonight's webinar. We also filmed a track walk with Kenton Cook, one of our drivers, pro drivers, and with Randy Pobst in a 13-minute, very much slowed down review of the course, looking at pavement changes, camber, and curbs and more. Just a quick update. This is fairly new to our team membership program, that track day competitors are now allowed to benefit from many of the same offerings that we have for all of our team members. So that's wonderful. You can see some of the benefits here. Going back to the resources, you can find those on MazdaMotorsports.com. We'll be using, or I should say Tom and Randy will be referencing the video that Tom did at Road Atlanta, a quick lap. You can see it on Mazda USA's YouTube site or on MazdaMotorsports.com. We asked the question, of course, or the questions of who the audience is to enable Tom and Randy to better position their feedback and walking everyone through the course. So you can see some of the results here. To answer, particularly in one PowerPoint slide, what car and classes everyone compete in, it was just easier to ballpark and say a lot of spec Miatas, a lot of RX-7 and the Miatas in the other classes. But there was a wide range of classes and cars, which is wonderful. Moving on. Randy Pobst is going to start from here. Randy and Tom will switch off, but Randy, if you don't mind taking them through a 30,000 foot up level just to start.
I love that expression that you used, David Cook. Thank you, and welcome everybody. Great to see you here on the webinar tonight. Pretend you're in a drone and you got a GoPro hanging from you and you ascend as high as you can over Road Atlanta. When you look down, this is roughly what you'll see. Road Atlanta was built back in about '72, and the rumor is it was the guy who owned the land just drove a bulldozer through the woods to create the course. And as such, it's an old school track. And you look at this, it's very roughly a circle. Most of the modern tracks that you'll see turn back on themselves a lot, kind of like very large versions of a go-kart track like the old Malibu Grand Prix circuits that is maximizing every inch of space they have. But at Road Atlanta, it's more of a circle. And in fact, the great Nürburgring in Germany is like that as well. And Road Atlanta reminds me of like a little piece of the Nürburgring. So you don't have to go. You come drive Road Atlanta, you're getting a taste of what the Nürburgring is like, which means it has a lot of fast corners, third, fourth gear. And when you come to Road Atlanta, it'll benefit you greatly to understand which corners are classic, enter nice and slow, get the car pointed, and then add the power and accelerate off, a classic late apex corner, and which corners are about carrying speed, about having a high minimum speed. There are lots of places at Road Atlanta where one of the most important parts of the corner is not overslowing the entry. And we're going to deal with that all the way around the track. So be aware that we're going to be looking at how some corners of Road Atlanta are a high min speed corner, a high minimum speed. You don't want to slow down too much. Keep your speed up. And a couple of very important corners are the opposite. They're corners with a kind of a lower minimum speed where you turn and set up an early power, straightened out exit, which is kind of a classic sense of driving a corner. So keeping that in mind, let's move on to the next slide and start to talk about turn one. David, if you can help me get to that slide. Thank you very much. Turn one is a fast corner. You're entering that turn almost the same speed you get out on the back straightaway because you're coming out of a fast corner. Turn 12 is a fast corner leading onto this front straightaway, and you're entering turn one at a high rate of speed, and it requires a short, firm brake, and the entry is downhill, and it's less than 90 degrees. That's factor one that make this a high min speed corner. And you see in this picture, just on the other side of the corner station, the flag station there, you can see the, I guess it's black and white, red and white wall going up. The turn goes steeply up just past the middle. And Road Atlanta is, that's the other important factor about Road Atlanta, the hills. It's up and down all the way around. Remember the general rule, going down, less grip. Going up, more grip. The reason turn one is such an important corner to have a high minimum speed is because the grip gets better after the halfway point. It gets a lot better. The hill catches you. So you do a short, firm, straight brake, and then ease out of the brake gradually. Rookies, a slow brake release is one of the most important things you can do to make yourself a better driver, because most rookies don't do that. Release the brake slowly as you're turning in for one, and keep your speed up, but don't try to accelerate real hard until you get to that hill. And it means you're going to use an apex, and an apex is where you get down to the inside of the corner. You're going to use an apex that's actually earlier than it would be if this corner was flat. That's your key. Now, I love this slide because it's an excellent shot of right where there's a pavement change. Road Atlanta has repaved the line at the apex in turn 1 and over there in turn 10A and 10B. If you haven't been here in a year or two, this is brand new. The grip on this new pavement is really good, but in turn 1, there's a big bump there. There was a bump there before. I think it actually got worse. And it's been there since they paved it, because I was the lucky guy that got to do the very first test drive in the Road Atlanta Corvette pace car around there. And myself and a motorcycle racer were bouncing through there pretty good. So there's a big bump right in the middle of that corner. Just be aware that because of the hill catching the car, it doesn't seem to upset most cars very much, unless you have a car that's very stiff or one that has a lot of bump steer. In other words, the toe changes as the wheels are going up and down in the suspension. So when you arrive at this point, from your turn in, once you get the car pointed, you should be maintaining a relatively high speed. It'll feel like a speed that's too fast to make the corner. Ideally, it should be too fast to make the corner until you get to the hill. And when you arrive at the hill, the inertia of your forward momentum pushes you into that pavement, doesn't it? The road turns up and you get that positive G straight down on the car. It's like the hand of God pushing it into the pavement. The grip improves, and you can now add throttle and, depending on the power you have, track out. The exit of turn 1 depends completely on how powerful your car is. Spec Miata, go all the way across to the exit curbing, because as I told Tom last night when we were working on this, in a Spec Miata, every corner is a high minimum speed corner because they don't accelerate hard enough to need a really late apex and a good straight exit the way a much more powerful car would, like, say, maybe an E-Production RX-7 or higher. Do they run D? I don't even know the classes that well. Maybe somebody could help. So, a Spec Miata, you'll pick up the throttle, but if you're doing this right, your car is going to be so close to the limit that you can't slam that throttle down. It's still a squeeze because horsepower makes your car run wider, and it only takes a little bit to widen your line. And in fourth gear at about 85 miles an hour, you're only going to have a little bit in a Spec Miata. So use all the road on your exit, because you're thinking about your setup for turn 2. From here at turn 1 at Road Atlanta, the corners are all connected all the way to the exit of 5. So you're starting a flow here that connects all the way to turn 5. So as you exit 1, you're setting up for the brake zone for 3, actually, which happens in turn 2. And we're going to get to those step by step. As you go up the hill in a more powerful car, it's best to not track out all the way. And because you don't have as much time to get back to straighten out the brake zone, we'll talk about that a little bit more as we get up the hill. But in a more powerful car, a car that has more power than grip, use only about half track, no more than 3/4. And we'll see why as we move on to turn 2. Taking a look at the data page here for turn 1, we get our first look at a little data overlay. For the rookies, this shows a picture of road speed. The top line is the road speed, and there are actually 2 lines there, but without this blown up more, that's not immediately obvious. And then the accelerator position or throttle position and brake pressure on the bottom. Now, when I started racing, Tom, this didn't even exist. It was actually better, because if you were good, nobody knew why. All you could do was talk about it. Now that we have data, we can look at this stuff and see exactly what these drivers are doing. So look at that road speed. On the top line, you can see 2 lines when they turn down. What we're looking at is how late the 2 drivers have hit the brakes. One of them hit the brakes later and was able to go a little bit faster. In fact, that's actually a pretty big difference, frankly. Had carried more speed on the way into the corner. And if we look at the middle of the corner down where it says turn 1, their speeds are similar enough that it's really hard to even see a difference. So they both came down to about the same minimum speed, which means that one driver did a better job of braking, of deceleration. And then on the exit, there may be a tiny difference in the lines there. I can't tell one from the other. It looks like there's a slight difference. What do you think, Tom?
Yeah, potentially, hard to tell without a steering angle sensor exactly where they are and how much steering wheel they had to give it. But it looks
So
like
they're
the lines
close.
are.
Yeah, so they're close. And on a regular data trace, we'd be able to put the cursor on that line and get the exact number for either one of those two data lines, and you know the exact speed. Because even if you have, well, if you have 1 mile an hour, that's a lot. It really pays off. And you can't always see 1 mile an hour on a data trace until you blow it up really closely. Now, if we look at the accelerator pedal position, two things real interesting about this. Both drivers, they seem to come off the gas very similarly, even though there's a difference in road speed. And when they go back to the gas, they go back, wait a little bit, and then add the rest. That waiting a little bit is keeping a high minimum speed. Both drivers were attempting to do that, and this is a good picture of how to drive turn 1. You need to come into kind of a maintenance throttle once you get the car pointed at the apex, a bit of a maintenance throttle to keep your minimum speed high until the hill catches you. And when the hill catches you, you roll on the rest of your power. I would actually like to see that throttle, the last bit where they go to full throttle, be a little bit more gradual. It makes me think that they could have had an even higher minimum speed. Because if you can slam the throttle straight to the floor like that, maybe you weren't as close to the absolute limit of the tire in the corner as you could have been, which is the goal at the apex in a high minimum speed corner, is to be pure cornering speed as you're going through the apex, not decelerating, not accelerating at that point. And then in the brake pressure, in those two traces, the data shows us exactly why one car was able to go faster for a little bit. That driver braked later, but he braked harder. And as he brought his speed down, he ended up at the exact same brake pressure at the exact same time as he was trailing off, which tells me that he did a better job of slowing the car down. And beyond that, if I see my colors of my lines correctly here, he was able to go to more throttle a little sooner also, which means he was a little quicker in and he was a little quicker out. It was a win-win. He just did a better job through that corner. Now, what do we mean when we say keep a high minimum speed? We're going to go into this in a little bit more detail because it's so more important on many of the turns here at Road Atlanta. And for a definition, minimum speed is when you decelerate for the corner, it's the point where you're at the lowest speed through that whole corner segment. In a high minimum speed corner, that's usually going to happen later than in a low minimum speed, a point and shoot kind of corner that we're going to discuss later in this lap. The application of this theory means that it typically occurs in corners where it pays to release the brake earlier and apex earlier. You know, we always talk about late apexes. That's great if there's a really long straightaway afterwards and, well, other factors like the hills, like we see in turn 1. But Road Atlanta has mostly faster corners in the upper gears, and all cars accelerate more slowly in higher gears than they do in lower gears because they don't have the torque multiplication of the low gear ratio. So the higher the gear you're in, the earlier you can apex. And the higher the gear you're in, the more you can carry a high minimum speed because you don't have to be setting up as much for your exit. You with me? And on the exit, if you're carrying speed through the corner, a high minimum speed, there's a greater payoff. In a sense, you're compensating for the turn not being as tight by relying less on the acceleration on the way off the corner and more on just being fast through the middle. That's what a high minimum speed corner is all about. Turn 2, Tom Long.
Thank you, Randy. Appreciate
Hope I didn't
it.
bore you.
Good evening, everybody. Thanks for having me, and thanks for joining us. I think everything Randy had mentioned in turn 1 is absolutely spot on. And the only way I think about turn 1 from a balance perspective is always making sure that you never have too much brake pressure on entry, because you want to keep that rear platform level, right? You want to be able to carry this minimum speed we're talking about. You want to be able to do that, and in order to do that, you can't have that rear jacked up too high, because you're going to lose that rear stability. So you want to make sure that you use a moderate amount of brake pressure so that you don't get that instability. And as far as that throttle trace we were talking about, you'll see that we'll go to a data trace for every corner throughout, and you'll see that that data trace, that throttle trace specifically, was a little unique to turn 1 because we were keeping that momentum, that balance over the rear of the car. Think about as you add that throttle to that maintenance throttle, that helps keep the rear stable as you can go up the hill before you go to full power. This is bringing us to call it turn 2, the entry of turn 3. And as Randy pointed out, we don't have to go all the way to the left side of the road if we're in a high horsepower car at the exit of turn 1. In a Spec Miata, which we're in this picture, we absolutely would have, but we would have come back over to the right to compromise the setup for turn 2, because we want to make sure that we don't have like the steering wheel turned as we're braking, right? Think about your friction circle. If you're on the left side of the edge of the road and you're steering to the left, that really limits the amount of braking you can do. If you're braking hard for turn 3 or moderately for turn 3, the rear of the car would step out if we were turning. So from this approach, from specifically speaking, maybe putting your right side tires over the yellow dotted line, which is pit out of the pro pits, that allows you then to have a straighter steering wheel for the braking into turn 3. Now, Randy, have you ever had I know you've driven some pretty magnificent cars around this place. Have you ever had a car that was so quick that you needed to compromise more than the yellow line, or has that always been a good reference point for you?
That's always been a good reference. It just seems to be more important in a really powerful car.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So right coming into view here, we see a patch of trees straight ahead. And that set of trees is actually going to be just to driver's right of the corner worker station, just behind the corner worker station. So that's going to be off the racetrack to the right. But it's a great reference at this point just to line yourself up. But don't focus on it too long, because we actually do need to go to the left as we get to the apex of turn 2, which really I look at as the entry to turn 3. And we're going to put our left side tires right up along the curbing, not on the curbing on the left, because that will really pull the car off the road, and ugly things happen over there. Don't ask how we know. But as we come up to turn 3, we put our left side tires right up along the edge of the road there, and we get our braking done. In a Spec Miata, relatively speaking, it's going to be about at the point where the curbing starts on the left. Just there or just prior to is where we're going to start our brake pressure for the setup for turn 3. And make sure, as we stated here, you best clock that apex curve. Depending on the car, obviously, you might take more, you might take less. But something that has a fairly forgiving suspension, you really want to make sure your right side tires are over this apex curve. And it is one of those high minimum speeds we're talking about. These types of corners, we want to focus on the brake release, get the car to stop slowing down, especially in our momentum cars, and get the momentum rolling over the curve. Our eyes are looking through the corner. Peripheral, we're looking at the curbing, but our focus, our primary vision, is at the exit. That's the limiting factor here. that's where you want to get your left side tires right to the edge. And by the way, the first curb we've touched so far on this lap is now at the apex curb of turn 3. So you haven't touched the apex curb or the exit curb of turn 1. Those are dangerous, as I'd like to think, and the entry to turn 3, another dangerous one. So again, here's your first curb you are now using, and that does play into your setup for this track. We do need some compliance with for curbing, and we do need some compliance for all the elevation. Because of all the elevation, as Randy was explaining, that does have an impact on how we set the car up. We're moving on.
Can I throw something in, Tom?
Yeah, please.
I was talking with our people here a little bit, but just wanted to make sure that in turn 3 we recognize too that there's a crest there. Did you mention that? Just about where you turn in, there's a crest, so the car's real light as you're going over that curb, a little bit in the air, and that's part of the reason we can hit that curb so hard, and it doesn't cause any more trouble than it does, because it looks and sort of feels pretty radical, but it's so wide and low, and the car's light enough when you hit it that you got it in almost anything.
Yeah, we were just here. Randy was racing in the Continental Tire Series and took a podium finish there at that race. I know those Freedom Autosport MX-5s were all over that curbing, and even our Sky Active Diesel prototype did, in fact, when we got the shock settings right for the race, we were using some of that apex curb even in the low ride height prototype. So yeah, just maybe not quite as much, maybe nibbling on it, but it definitely helps your radius and your angle through there. And again, specifically speaking to Stuart here about the okay to hit in a Formula car. Again, right front tire, maybe to it, and then as you feel more comfortable and you've got the grip in the tire and the experience starts to nibble at it, see how the car reacts. Not all cars react well to it, depending on how your setup is. Some Formula cars, some prototypes can take that curve, some can't. Really depends on, specifically speaking, about your ride. So you just need to take it a little bit step by step. So moving on to the exit of turn 3, we find ourselves up against the left curbing on the exit. Not a place we really want to use the left curbing. Again, it's very tall, not very user-friendly. It's just something we want to be right up against. And yeah, Miata, absolutely stay along the left side. We're really, this is where there's a lot of turns with not a lot of turn numbers. So it's stay against, is this turn 4 or is this the left bend after turn 3? But it is before we go down the hill into the S's. And I think it's important to point out that through here you're going to have an upshift in the spec Miata to 4th gear. Most cars you will upshift at some point to get set up for the downhill S's. But in the higher horsepower cars you will end up tracking out a bit more towards mid-track. You can see there's a corner worker station straight ahead. That's not a reference, but that's just an informational piece. And when the car tracks out to mid-track, you still want to get it a little bit back over to the left so you give yourself good radius for the next corner, setting up into the S's. Before we get there, I'll just give you, just to connect the piece, here we are at the setup of the S's. So we've gotten back to the left side of the road in the Miata. In a higher horsepower car, you might enter from a little off the left edge of the road. And we'll talk about this in just a second. I want to go back to talking about the data for turn 3. And here we have a great example between two different references, the black and the red line, about how to roll this momentum. Now take a look at how this happens. Okay, so the red versus the black. And what you'll see is that because one car is using an earlier, lighter brake pedal, it allows them to carry a whole lot more, and I can't see the speed because we don't have a reference here, but a whole lot more momentum through the middle of the corner. And that average higher minimum speed creates quite a bit of lap time. meaning it really makes the difference between in that sector, because you'll see they get off the throttle about the same point, they pick up the throttle about the same point. So the throttle positions look fairly similar, even though there is a bit of a drop right before they go to the brake pedal on the red car. But that minimum speed is substantially higher, which is going to result in quite a few tenths of a difference by the time you get to the exit. I'll go ahead and move it over to turn 4, the lower or the upper S's here, downhill S's, and go ahead, take it away, Randy.
This is a men from the boys, women from the girls point on this racetrack, people, in a fast car. In a Spec Miata, it's flat out for almost everybody. You just want to be steering with minimal steering inputs so you don't drag too much of your speed off the car, and you've got to be on the right line or it'll be real uncomfortable. And one thing I've noticed in the little teeny bit of Spec Miata racing I've done is that so many times I'm right on the bumper of a guy ahead of me, and I got to kind of watch through and around his car to figure out where I am. And dropping here at the top of the S's, you see that little bit of curbing on your left? That is your best guide, because you cannot see the apex curbing until after it's too late to turn in the proper line. What's a better way to say that? It takes a little time to learn Road Atlanta because of corners like this one where it's blind. The turn-in point is blind. You're turning before you can see what you're aiming for. And I know some drivers, Tom mentioned the trees on that last corner. In fact, many drivers, I think, benefit from getting a reference that's trees further down or a corner station or a wall. I personally have never been able to benefit from that. I don't like moving my focus to far away and then back right in front of the car again. It's really an individual driver thing. There are one or two places where I found it really useful. Here, I use the curving on the left, and just about the end of that curving on the left is where I start bending the wheel into the corner. It's a fast corner. Let's see, what have we got? Probably a short shift to fourth in a lot of corners, or a full-on shift to fourth in some cars. And in a lot of cars, it is almost flat. And those are the greatest corners there are when they're really fast and you can almost do them flat. In a Spec Miata, you should be able to do it flat, but don't do that the very first time you head down that hill, people. When you're new to a track, with the hills like Road Atlanta has and with the speeds that Road Atlanta has, be patient and take a little time to come up to speed. But be aware that this is, in a fast or a powerful car, is a very important corner for turning a good lap time. And in terms of setup, it's very important that your car feels stable here. I have always liked a very stable car at Road Atlanta because that stability gives me the confidence to release the brake and carry a lot of speed into the corner and have a high minimum speed. That is, again, a goal right here as you're dropping down into the S's. This is a very steep downhill corner, and the grip will go away, and you don't have a lot of room to adjust your line, or I'm sorry, you don't have a lot of grip to adjust your line when you're going down that hill. But I've got some good news for you. As you turn in just before that left curving ends, right? You can't see your target, but you're looking for it. You're looking over that crest. And shortly after you crack the wheel, this curve will come into view. And if this is your view, you've done a great job. You want to be up against that inside curb about 2/3 the way around it. And we're going very steeply downhill right now. There's not a lot of grip. This would be a really bad time to lift off the throttle abruptly. But if you're going wide, you have to, right? But A great way to handle this dropping into the S's is if you're going to slow down, do it before you get here. You got to plan ahead here, just like your investments for retirement. When you're coming in at the top of that hill, if you're going to slow down, ease off back there when everything's calm and balanced. And then as you crank that wheel down for the apex, roll the power in so you can have power on as you're heading down this hill to transfer a little bit of weight to your rear wheels and keep your Mazda nice and stable. Try to catch this inside curve on the right about 2/3 of the way down. I don't like to hit it. It's a little bit sharp on the edge, and the car is very light. It's on its tippy toes right here, and I don't want to upset it. And it's a high fear corner in a fast car, and hitting that curve on the right just increases the fear, and that's not good for speed. Got to have no fear, confidence for speed. And that's why a stable setup pays off at Road Atlanta in a corner like this one. But there's good news too. See the dark line there, the really dark line way over to the left? Most corners will have a dark line like that, and almost always that line is further than where you want to drive. It's the people who got out of shape and they leave some rubber. People don't drive there as much and they don't wear it off. The real line is always cleaner because cars aren't sliding as much and because a lot more cars go through there than out on the edge. But you see how far over that is? What that tells us is that cars can go pretty far out and still be all right. And the reason for that is dead ahead where the grass comes out, you see that left-hand bend, is the bottom of the hill. While we're looking at this view, I want to point out one more thing. If you ever get in big trouble here, that grass dead ahead is an escape route. You can go straight across that grass on your left. Try not to turn, try not to accelerate, don't decelerate, don't anything. Even Steven, straight across the grass and right back up on the pavement on the other side as a total emergency bail out of the airplane way to either miss an incident on the track to the right or to straighten up if your car is getting all out of shape and you can't even make the corner back to the right, okay? Keep that in mind as an emergency escape route. It works, but go across there nice and straight, not turning, not accelerating, not decelerating, I'll say again, because you're on grass and there's very little grip, and you don't want to make anything slide. But you will return to pavement very quickly. So that's a good answer. To go fast, you drop all the way down this hill and into the bottom of the S's. Right here in the bottom of the S's, the hand of God once again pushes down on the roof of your Miata, shoving it into the pavement, and your grip is fantastic. And you can take advantage of that in a couple of ways. One, like I spoke about in the last corner, if you've gotten a little wide in that right-hand bend down the hill, don't worry. You're going to grip up and you can get around this next bend. You'll just be scrubbing more speed and it won't be quite as pretty. And you can use that curve on the left there. It's also rather abrupt, but you have so much inertia pushing you into the pavement that you have this great grip right down there at the bottom of the hill. I love this part of the track because I like grip. The cars just feel so good right there. And it's almost like an autocross. You're floating it down that right-hand part. You land at the bottom and you crank it back left. With all that grip you've got, you can really get a good firm steering input because you want to actually apex the bottom of the hill rather late. You want to be inside all the way around this exit curbing. Don't get greedy and release your hands and drive straight on into that next bend that you see ahead of you. Remember, as we said earlier, all of these corners are connected. All the way from the turn-in of 1 to the exit of 5, you're always, well, to the entry of 5, you're always setting up for the next corner. So at the bottom of this hill, we're setting up for the entry to 5. Bottom of the hill does not have a number. It's the bottom of the S's. That's what everybody calls it. In the rain, water builds up here. Why? because it's the bottom, right? So be aware of that. It does rain at Road Atlanta a lot. See how green it is? And going down the hill, as a matter of fact, to back up for a moment, there's frequently a river that runs across there. So watch out for the rivers on the downhills and the uphills, and watch out for the puddles on the bottom, like here at the bottom of the S's. It does puddle up there. Apex this bottom late. Use the grip that pushed you into the road when you bottomed out and started heading back uphill on your way into turn 5. So we're going to apex late at the bottom of the S's. And the whole purpose of that is to get here. This driver's doing an excellent job. Is that you, Tom, the wheel of this car? Are you driving this? It's an E Street.
Essentially, in disguise.
Sorry?
In disguise, yes.
Okay. Keep that quiet, people. Fortunately, this is a closed forum. It's only us Mazda folks. And you apex late at the bottom of the S's, so when you turn back right, you can straighten out this tricky brake zone here for the entry to turn 5. This curbing, we're looking at the end of the curbing. You want to line up with the very end of the curbing. Can you see my cursor here, Tom?
Yeah.
While I'm moving this? Good, thank you. The beginning of the curbing goes this way. So don't line up with the beginning of the curbing. Apex late, turn back in the middle of the roadway so that you line up with the end of the curbing. This curve on the right is nice and wide, and once you get up on it, it's pretty smooth. But when you drop off of it, it's sharp. Some cars, back in the showroom stock days, I used to be all over this. A very soft car with a lot of suspension travel. You can use that curve on the right, and it gives you a worthwhile extra couple of feet turning in for 5. Most real race cars, that's too stiff, too violent, and it bounces you around right when you're in the delicate moment of trying to enter turn 5 and keep a high minimum speed there too. So I failed to mention that at the bottom of the S's you go to throttle in anything. Hard throttle, because all that grip allows you to turn and throttle all at the same time to come around and set up for this brake zone. Now this brake zone, remember I just said that curve points more this way and then more this way. It's a curve. It's a curving brake zone, a lot like the entry to turn 3. So it's another braking situation where you want to be squeezing into the brake. You don't want to attack it here. The car's not going straight. The harder you want to brake, the straighter the car's got to be, and the car's not going straight here. You're bending it back around. You're trying to straighten it out. Squeeze into that brake, and slow release, because you're also cornering. And the tires are busy. They're trying to do 2 things at once for you, and you can't ask them to do a lot of 2 things at once. You're doing some cornering, so you do a smooth brake, smooth off the brake as you enter the corner. This is one of the fundamental keys of going fast at Road Atlanta, is to not attack the brake pedal entering turn 5 or turn 3 back there that Tom was talking about, or even turn 1 to a certain extent. Really important here because you're cornering. You drive like a dancer. Smooth out of the throttle, smooth into the brake, smooth off the brake. Even your throttle drop here, especially in a powerful car, should take some time because you're cornering. You don't want to be sudden with your weight transfer and shock those tires that are busy cornering when all of a sudden you're asking them to slow down too. Got it? We're really filling the friction circle through here. It's a finesse section. And so those slow hands and slow feet are fast into turn 5 as we set up for this brake zone. Tom, am I taking this right on through turn 5? Or did you want to jump back in?
Yeah, I'll take it. Thanks very much. So as Randy said, the entry of turn 5, very similar to the entry of turn 3. I go back to my friction circle here. If I'm steering through those S's, I want to make sure that I'm late at each end of that curve, so that sets me up nice and straight for the braking zone in turn 5. Don't get suckered into braking late into 5. It's an early brake to have an early brake release, because if you stand at the turn-in for turn 5 and you look up at the exit, I am no joke telling you it is a 30 or 40-foot climb. It is huge how steep it goes uphill here. So it is an exit speed corner, not only for that reason, but also because we have a long run all the way down to turn 6. So getting back to that friction circle, we want to have the car nice and straight so we can apply smooth brakes before that curbing starts on the right that we see in the picture here. It allows us to release the brake, and we have good front grip because remember, we're going uphill here. So we can get back to the power, squeeze the power at the apex, and as we continue on through the corner, we end up seeing that we are now turned in, approaching the apex curve. Again, not a place we want to touch any curbing until we get to the exit curve. Okay, so now we're on this exit curve, and I'll go back to the data slides in just a second. Just wanted to talk through the corner. That this is a section where, depending on the type of car you're in, you can use this exit curve. It can help the radius tremendously. In a spec Miata or cars that have a lot of compliance in the suspension, you can use a lot of it. In fact, you almost can use all of it. Just, you got to build up to it. Don't just go flying across the curbing the first time. Also considerations. If it's cool out in the morning, it could be slick because the paint, it's a painted surface, could be have dew on it or things like this. Your tires aren't up to grip. So keep these as considerations. This level of grip is different than the track. So be ready for it. Cars with less compliance, open wheel cars, things like that, you might not use any of the curb. You might use it as maybe just a little nibble or a buffer as you slide to it. But that's something you'll have to work up to. But again, you are going over a huge crest, a huge uphill climb here as you come up to it. So definitely thinking exit speed here. You need to keep a high minimum speed because we are in a momentum car in this situation, just like we've been talking about, but it's important to remember that if you focus on it.
Tom, can I jump in for a second? You were on the entry photo just for a moment? Yeah, I just wanted to throw this in, and forgive me if you mentioned it. Entering turn 5 is a lousy passing zone. Really impossible to make a clean pass on a good competitor there. You can only pass a much slower car or lap somebody, and even that's difficult.
That's a great point, Randy. In fact, having the honor to be able to run, for me, my first Petit Le Mans race this year, I don't know I made any pass, even in our high downforce prototype on the entry to here against any GT car or anything. I didn't see anybody pass at any time. You want to set it up, as Randy says, set this up for the exit. Great passing opportunity to catch a little bit of a draft down towards 6 and pop out to make the pass. 6 is a great passing opportunity. I agree. 5, not so much. Good point. Talking about the data real quick through the S's and so forth, you can see through the S's, depending on the type of car you're in, you will have a bit of a lift. This comes out of a GT style car. This is actually out of the Skyactiv diesel Mazda 6 from the 2013 season. So those cars did require a little bit of a lift as you turn into the right. We're looking as we turn right down the hill, we had to breathe out of the throttle, not all the way, but a little confidence breathe. And more than just confidence, what does lifting off the gas do? Puts weight on the front tires. Gives us that grip to steer the car. So always be thinking like that. Think of your car sitting on scale pad. What end of the car do you need to have the grip? Sometimes it's the front, sometimes it's the back. Really depends on the type of corner and where you are in the corner. So that's the way I personally think about it when I'm driving. Okay, we come up to the exit of turn 5, and we are letting the car unwind, and now we look at the data for turn 5. So in earlier, lighter brake pressure, you can see the red car does brake earlier and gets a better set on the entry. The minimum speed is pretty similar, but look at who got back to power first. The red car. And the red car wins down the straightaway to turn 6. So Mark Chattel had a good question there about easily getting snookered into braking too late for 5. It's tempting because it's uphill, it feels good, but back it up, especially in that spec Miata you have. Back it up right before the entry of the curbing on the right. That's where that brake point starts. A firm but not too hard of a brake, a medium brake there. Call it scale of 1 to 10, maybe a 5 or 6 pedal, maybe a 7 pedal, and release the brake and get back to power up the hill, and look at how that red car wins off that corner. All right, moving along to turn 6. Go ahead, Randy.
All this talk is making me want to drive. I'm jealous of you people going to the ARC. Sign me and Tom up for the Enduro. I assume they're having an Enduro Sunday morning, right? They usually do.
Sure.
I think I won it 10 years ago. And so we've come out of 5. We got a good run out of 5. And while we're hitting on passing zones, the entry to 6 is an excellent passing zone. And although you do need some kind of advantage, if you're battling neck and neck with a good competitor who has a car with similar capabilities to yours, or at least is being driven similarly to yours, it's difficult to pull off a clean pass by just pulling out and going in there, balls out, and trying to get them on bravery. You need to have some kind of a little mistake from the guy ahead of you, or you need to have identified that this guy's a little weak in this kind of corner. If you've been following him, or anytime you're catching a car, you should be watching and seeing where you're better than he is, so when you get there, you have information about how to pass him. Where am I getting him? Where am I better than him? And use that in your passing attempts so that you're always clean. And you don't just go in with a Hail Mary on a wing and a prayer, pull out, and I'm going to brake later than this guy. Maybe it'll work, maybe it won't. You're going to have a longer, more successful and happier career if you have a plan, if you have a reason to think you can pass this person here. And turn 6, if you got that better run out of 5 by using the big curve that Tom was talking about, you used all of it. You braked earlier, got that harder run off like we saw from the data line. The red car got a bunch more throttle earlier, so he got a run, maybe a little bit of a draft. And to continue on the whole passing issue, don't make it look like you're going to pass. The best passes are a surprise. If you hang out there and give this guy ahead of you the idea that you're going to do it, he's going to try harder. It's better to have a complete surprise and pop out at the last minute if you can. Don't fake it a couple of times, letting this guy know, oh, look, he's good, he's better than me into 6. I better protect. And to protect into 6, say you know you're not good in turn 5. Pardon me. So you know you're vulnerable in turn 6. You go down the inside. Pardon me. When you come out of 5, don't track back to the left. Drive right down the right-hand side of the road. You know, the guy's going to hate you, but it's your right. You can pick the side of the road. If it's the second lap of the race and the guy behind you is way faster than you everywhere, you're kind of a jerk if you block him in every corner, I'll tell you that. But if it's near the end of the race, especially the last lap, you have every right to choose a side of the road and make it more difficult for the car behind you to get by you. And if you go down the right side into turn 6, you are making it very difficult for the guy behind you to get by you. But he does have a little bit of a chance. An outside pass works a little bit better in turn 6 than it does probably anywhere else on this track because it's banked. See here on the entry, it's pretty level. But this is like a little baby oval track corner going the other way. It's an Australian oval track corner. They go right down there because they do everything backwards. Even the toilets flush the other way around down there. And it's banked. Also, turn 6 leads directly into turn 7. There's no straightaway after 6, or not very darn much of one. So this makes turn 6 another one of our high minimum speed corners. And it actually goes beyond minimum speed to being a high entry speed corner. Turn 6 is about going in there fast and not worrying about the power until very, very late in the corner because you're not going anywhere. And it's a big old corner. It's a little bit of a decreasing radius. And, pardon me, you're going to get your best lap time by being fast all the way into and through that turn 6 corner. That's why you want to get off the brake relatively early. It's all about entry speed. And that's really a place where I've been a little weak as a driver because I'm just so dedicated to apexing late and getting to that power right around the inner curve and getting the drive off the corner that it was not uncommon for people to outrun me in this corner. I always thought, how is that guy doing that? I'm getting a beautiful exit. He's doing it because he is not trying to get an exit. Sorry, one too many clicks there. You know what? About here, this is the end of turn 6. We're tracking out. This is kind of where you want to be getting back to power, or where you want to be accelerating anyway. You carry that entry speed all the way through the corner till you're almost exiting, using that banking to catch the car. You could use a little bit of power to balance the car, like we talked about at the very beginning in the definition of a high minimum speed corner. It often pays off to use a little bit of maintenance throttle, just enough to keep your speed up, but not trying to accelerate, or even super sophisticated, a little bit of power to balance the car, but still decelerating because of the scrub of the tires, till almost the very end of the corner here, till almost you've got the wheel straightened out, which is really different from almost any other corner you're ever going to drive. Let me think about it. Is anywhere else at Road Atlanta like this? Yeah, maybe turn 10A when we get there. But this is an unusual situation, and there's a lot of time there. And this great entry speed will make you very difficult to pass on the way in there. If you do your brake, rotate, and aim for the apex kind of driving style, the guy carrying that big entry speed is going to be able to just go right under you and slide it all the way out to this exit curbing. Turn 6 is a really great place to pass if you can do it because you're not hurting your exit. See this? Turn 7 is right there. So when you pass, it reduces your speed through a corner. So a turn like turn 6 is a good place to pass because you're reducing your speed here when you're passing that guy. Doesn't take much off your lap time. Therefore, the people ahead of you do not get away and the people behind you do not catch up. Choosing passes in positions like this that don't affect your lap time very much allow you to turn more consistent lap times and will help you win races. And the longer the race is, the better it's going to be for you. So horsepower comes in very late in turn 6 as we head into turn 7. Tom, you want to pick up turn 7, or should I just keep going here? Whatever you want to do.
Sure, that's just fine. Yeah, I agree. That it's something important to mention about passing sequences, especially in pack racing like a Spec Miata. if you're, say, in that second pack, running 7th place and the first through 6th guys are up there, or say you're in 8th place and the 7th through 10th are right there, if you start racing those guys in your pack, you're ever going to catch the leaders. And so what Randy's point about making a clean pass into 6 doesn't hurt your lap time allows you to still get set up, because you need to work together to catch that front pack. If you start holding each other up, you're never going to get there. I realize, guys, that we are kind of at the 1 hour limit, so we'll try to push through and get the rest of this done in the next little bit. So I appreciate you sticking around. And as we get to turn 7 here, this is definitely a different mentality than some of the other high minimum speed corners. We're not saying it's not about momentum, but certainly it's about exit speed. And if you need to slow the car up a little bit more here to get it turned, to get the good run off the corner, that's the winner. Strategically speaking, if you were on your own, you would want to make sure you get back to full throttle at apex so that you can get a good exit off. But if you are leading the pack in here, then you might want to overslow the entry a little bit. Not so much that they pop out to pass you here, but overslow it a little bit to ensure you're the first one back to power. Because remember, the first one back to full power wins off the corner. It's not the first person back to power, it's the first person back to full power will win. And so if you can ensure that, that'll at least give you a good run off the corner. And again, if you're on the flip side of this, if you're the trailing car, you're going to want to maybe overslow the entry a little bit so you can get the run off the corner, trap them under those Mazda bridges down the back straight away, and pull out and make your pass going by in turn 9. So moving along into turn 7, we got the brake point on our left along that left curbing. We do not want to use this curbing again on the exit. So just reiterating, I think we've used the apex curb at 3. We've used the exit curb at 5 potentially, and that's it. We have not used anything else yet. As we get to the apex of turn, we'll come back to that data slide in just a second, and we're talking about exactly some of the things we discussed here about why it's important to get the most out of turn 7 exit. It is 3,700 feet long, which is incredibly long and great for passes. So as we get through 7, you'll see that there is some exit curving. And this is some curving that, depending on the type of car you're in, you can use. Sometimes you're using it in a spec Miata, sometimes you're not. It really depends. Or these softer sprung cars, you can use it to your advantage. But again, sometimes you can hinder your grip out of the corner and really not get the full exit. It will help the radius, but it might hurt the grip on the power downside. So really got to feel that out and know that seeing some mistakes happen here, whether you're crossing back to the right side of the track or slipping off the left. Important to always look where you want to go if the car gets out of shape, not necessarily where the car's pointed. Eyes always looking down the track where you want to go, and your hands will take you there. So, because the walls do tend to get a little close in this section. Backing up real quickly, talking about this data for this area here. Couple things. You'll see that in turn 6, that lighter brake pressure that black car drives on the entry, and more so than the lighter brake. But look at the brake release. It's subtle, but the black car releases the brake and starts to release the brake sooner. And look at the results in the difference in apex speed. Huge difference in apex speed here. And what you'll find, as Randy points out, that at the apex, more towards the exit, is when you'll start to pick up throttle again if driven well. And you can notice that the red car picks up a lot of throttle in order to accelerate back up to its peak speed before having hit the brake for 7. Where look at the base, the bottom, the valley of the black cars, minimum apex speed in 6 to where the peak speed is before they hit the brake for 7, it's not that much, meaning they've carried a lot of speed through 6, and they didn't really accelerate anymore before they got to 7, even though on full throttle, because they were carrying so much speed through there. Very, very critical. Same thing in 7. Lighter brake, less brake usually slows the car down less. Imagine that. And you get a better speed through the corner, but keep in mind, they were a little late going back to power. So you need to be the judge looking at this data if you had your time slip or your variance, depending on the data software you're using, what that might be called, to look how much time did you gain in 7 by carrying more speed, and how much time did you lose by not being the first one back to power. That point all the way to the end of the straightaway will be the determining factor of which one's the faster way to go. Randy, is there anything you wanted to add about this or turn 7?
No, sir, that was beautiful, and it's amazing how fast that hour went by. Can't believe it.
All right. So we're just going down the back straight here, just clicking through a couple of these slides, seeing that the slowest corner on the track, well, one of the slowest corners on the track is turn 7. The next one coming right up after the fastest point on the track down this long back straightaway. Go ahead, Randy.
Straightaway is all about the draft, and one way to make the draft pass work is to not be too close to the guy ahead of you when you're coming on the straightaway. If you start the straightaway right on his tail, how are you ever going to catch him, right? You start right on his tail when you don't want to pass him, when you want to just go faster, which in Spec Miata is often very important. Tom really wisely mentioned about keeping up and being in a second pack, and sometimes that second pack is there because the drivers raced each other too much, and in places where it didn't help, like on the straightaway. I know you've got to run on that guy and that guy's draft, but if you stay behind him and hook up as a 2, 3, 4 car train, you're going to go a lot faster. So think about where you are in line, where you are in the race. Is it still early? When it's early, passes need to be more specifically aimed at not costing you lap time. When it's early, you want to do that multiple car draft. You want to move forward, but you want to stay in the pack, because if you're immediately trying to move forward, you may lose the lead pack and drop further back. I'm talking too much, but this is really cool. So anyway, long straight's about the draft. It's also about thinking early which side of the track you want to enter turn 10A. Turn 10A is a left-hander, so if you're worried about getting past, you want to go down that straightaway on the left side of the track. The line is the right side. Turn 10A is another corner that is about entry speed, but the brake zone is a classic brake zone where you're going dead straight, your hands are nice and straight. You come over the hill, it's actually a corner back to the right. In a Spec Miata, it doesn't really feel like it, but in an RX-7 Turbo, it does. And as you go around that hill and start to head steeply downhill into the brake zone, hands straight, a real strong brake, and go quickly from full throttle to full brake. And you can do it quickly because you're going straight and balanced. It is completely different braking from over there in turn 5 and turn 3. Here, straight, balanced, hard brake, late brake buys you a lot of lap time and makes you hard to pass. And at the end of the brake zone, the road actually levels out. And when it levels out, the grip comes up. So unlike many corners, you can brake harder late in the brake zone. Spec Miatas are, man, you're darn near on the level, aren't you, Tom, when you go to the brakes?
Yeah, you're looking for about the 100 marker.
100, yeah. Yeah, that's later than most real cars that go 100 150 instead of 110. But it's a great challenge, and you do, with spec Miata guys, you need to wait till the 100, ideally, to be quick. And the road gets level, and for turn 10A, it is a compromise corner, and it's connected to 10B. And it is all about entry speed. Again, 10A is a corner where you can apex rather early, and you can turn in. It's very much a trail braking corner, and it's very much a corner to start releasing brake pressure, what feels to me as rather early. Carry that speed down in there to the apex, and the apex, 10A, has a wide, rough curbing. You want to use all of that. The inside, it's on the inside. That part of the car is very lightly loaded. It doesn't upset it. It buys you a couple of feet, which is a lot in a slow corner. This is a relatively slow corner, but because it leads into another very important corner, especially in spec Miata, 10B leads all the way down to turn 1 in a spec Miata, probably is going to be flat out. When you come out of 10A, don't track out all the way. Leave a little bit of pavement on your right. The more powerful your car is, the less you track out of 10A, so that you're set up for 10B. 10B goes uphill, which is good, but on the exit it goes off camber, which is bad. So it's kind of a combination of things. Again, you have a very similar curb to 10A. 10B, this curbing here is low. It's just a rumble strip. You can actually use the dirt on the inside depending on your car, but don't, because it gets wallered out, it gets deeper and deeper, and it's throwing dirt up on the track for the guys behind you, and that's not sportsmanlike. But use all of the curb. Also, if it gets deep enough, you can damage a tire when you come back over it. I actually won a championship in 10A that way. When the guy passing me, I heard it go kabang when he got too far inside and hit that curb. So as you turn in for 10B, you turn kind of early. It's uphill. The grip improves at first. You apex about halfway, 2/3 of the way through this. The more powerful the car is, the later you apex it. And then as you head up the hill, halfway up that exit, right here, the road goes to off camber. Whoops, I got one too many. The road goes to off camber, and every car on earth that's rear drive wants to power oversteer, and every car on earth that's front drive wants to power understeer. Right here, that's happening because the grip gets much worse when you cross that crown in the road. There's a lot of crown. It really affects your grip. The grip in this whole section is a lot better than it used to be with the new pavement, at least so far. And so that part's good. But the grip gets worse when you get here. On the outside here of the track out, there's a curbing that gets rougher the further out you go. And it gets rough enough that I think it slows down most cars. I don't recommend using any more than 1 tire width of it. That probably is okay. If you got to use it, you know, it started sliding, the car's getting funky, go ahead and use it. But I think your ultimate fastest lap time will come from straightening up and just dribbling the inside edge of that, and being aware that that jiggling of your tires on the curbs in 10A, 10B, and maybe on the exit of 10B can knock your brake pads back in the calipers. So if you don't brake for turn 12, which nobody fast does, be aware that when you get to 1, you're probably going to need to tap it up and avoid getting in trouble all the way down there. Keep that in mind. So you dig out of this corner and head for the bridge. Let's look at our data trace. We have one driver brake. They brake at the same time, but the black trace took longer to get to his maximum brake pressure. He'd have been better off getting to his maximum quicker. As long as it doesn't lock a wheel, you want to get to your maximum braking capability as quickly as you can. Oh, wait, this is throttle. I'm sorry. Tom, I'm glad you didn't notice that. You're busy answering questions. He rolled off the throttle gently. You want that throttle to just bang because you're going straight. It's not like turn 3 and 5. Pow, drop right off of that throttle. This is a rookie mistake. Some rookies, it looks way worse. They just roll off that throttle in a straight, hard brake zone. The brake trace looks really good, real strong. They're both coming up vertically to a maximum. The one guy is working harder to stay right on the limit of his braking. And as we go into turn 10, we can see the black car has, if I'm reading these colors right, correct me if I'm wrong, Tom, has a lot more speed on the way into turn 10A. And then, is he faster in 10B too? I'm not good on these colors.
Yeah, exactly.
He's faster in both.
The maximum brake pressure is almost identical, but look at how the black car is able to release the brake ever so slightly on the same curve, but ever so slightly, and look at the difference as a result as you see at the speed in 10A, the minimum speed in 10A, and then they're able, potentially, because of the car placement, as Randy was pointing out, to stay on fuller throttle. And that little dip is probably just to put a little weight on the nose as you turn for B, and they are quicker through A and B on the way out to under the bridge.
Look at that data trace on the red car throttle straight up, which means, guess what? If you can do that, you overslowed it.
Yeah.
If you're on the limit of the tires, it should be a more gradual rolling on of the throttle. And so this, whenever you see a straight up throttle like that, and you're not spinning the car out, you probably have overslowed the corner.
Yeah, that's absolutely. You know, your comment about the exit curve at 10B is interesting. I've watched cars as a spectator or just coaching from the nice amphitheater that they have set up there at 10B and on driver's left. And it is violent and jarring how much the wheel moves up and down in the wheel well when you get out onto that exit curbing, Randy. I tell you, it's scary looking. I really don't plan to use that curb, and like you said, if you do, it's probably just a tire width on this exit curb, no more than that. But clobber those apex curbs, get out under that hill, and have you talked about where you're aiming for under this bridge as we approach 11 into 12?
I haven't.
Go
I have
for
not.
it. Yeah. So as we exit here, we are aiming, and I think this, I'd be interested to hear Randy's opinion, but personally where I aim for is for the furthest right square under this bridge. There's a white square, there's a red square, and a yellow. Yellow being furthest left, white being furthest right. And exactly, thank you. And I aim for the white as I go under because that cuts the shortest radius possible. And that, to me, seems like in most cars. I find that if I aim anywhere further center or left of that, I've had a lot of wheel input I have to ask of the car as I come over this crest down the hill, and it just doesn't feel good. Another reference point physically on the track for you is that yellow dotted line that enters into the pro pit. You can put your right side tires right over that yellow line or even straddle it a bit, and that's a really good way to ensure that you're on that proper trajectory setting up for turn 12. We already talked about that. All right, Randy, do you want to take it down the hill here?
You betcha. I have a strong opinion here. You may not agree with it, but I ran a Spec Miata race here, and I wish I could remember the name of my car owner. Roger, he's making those great lightweight FIA undershirts that I tried that I really liked. and unfortunately I can't give him a plug because I don't remember, but he let me drive his Spec Miata, and I ended up all by myself. I wasn't out. So I was just working on making my lap time better, blah, 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 blah. And in this Spec Miata, I was driving the normal line under the bridge, go under that white mark, see the dotted line for the pit entry on the pro pit inside, go under my center of my car pretty much, and then I tracked out all the way to this left side curbing. I found I could do turn 12 really easily, and I thought, you know, I've always been a driver who likes to drive the absolute shortest distance. What if I come out from under that bridge? It occurred to me when I passed a car. I passed a slower car that went all the way outside. I went down underneath him, and I found I could still easily do turn 12 flat. Wasn't as easy. So over the next few laps, I started not tracking out in the Spec Miata. I drove down the middle of the road, not right side, but middle, and drove right around that turn 12 corner. And for me, 0.3 of a second. And I had done so many laps in this car by myself. It was a really good test. I had a good baseline. So Spec Miata drivers, always minimize your distance. The downside of doing that is that you scrub more in 12. But it did not slow my lap times, and I think that's because all Miatas scrub, as race cars go, they scrub very little speed. They just aren't as sensitive to that as most other cars are, especially front drive cars, I believe. So that's your super top secret, attendees only secret for 0.3 of a second at Road Atlanta is drive down the middle of the road here. Don't track all the way out in a Spec Miata or any other car that can easily do turn 12 flat out. If you approach a corner, you can easily do flat out. Don't set it up. You're wasting space. From middle of the road to here and back, got to be 50 feet or more. That's significant. Now, in faster cars, you go all the way left. Man, we're really making this long, aren't we, Tom? Or I am, I know. Turn 12 is a late apex corner. Turn 12 goes up for a little bit at the beginning, but right at the apex, when you really want to be getting on the power, it goes over a little bit of a crest. Turn 12, for that reason, and because it's fast, is a corner where having a stable setup really pays off, unless you're Andrew Carbonell, who can drive just about anything, or you, for that matter, Tom. But me, I like a nice, stable car through turn 12 because it's really fast, and this is another men from the boys, women from the girls corner. In a Spec Miata, I find it actually kind of pretty easy flat out, but in faster cars, more powerful cars, definitely not. It can be right on the edge if you have a very powerful car, and this is where you can kill people if you make sure your car is stable through here. It's also a fast corner. It's fifth gear in a lot of cars, so if you have wings, you're really feeling your aero balance through turn 12. And wing adjustments are going to be most obvious here than anywhere else on the track. And in powerful cars, I've always felt that if you have a car that feels confident and you feel fast and strong in turn 12 and dropping into the S's, which is at like turn 4-ish, that right-hander dropping in the S's, you are going to win the race. This is not the case in slower cars where 12 and dropping in the S's are pretty easy flats. It becomes more of a drafting strategy. You can come out of turn 12 and use the draft because you're going really fast, but not if you're right on the guy's tail. It pays off to leave a little room when you're going under the bridge, leave a little room entering 12 so that you catch him on the way out. It has always seemed to me that the draft is more effective in a corner. I can't think of any logical reason for that, but it seems that if I'm catching a guy and I'm getting a draft on the exit of a corner, it's more effective. And that run out of 12 into the draft will allow you to pull out and pass down into turn 1, which is the second best passing zone on the track after turn 10A. I got one more thing I got to say before we leave, Tom. Can I go back to that turn in? Mine won't let me. Yeah, right there. Critical, entering turn 12, if you track it on out, which most normal people in normal cars do, follow that curve to the bottom, go past the end of the curve before you turn in. It's a later turn in than it looks like. Turn 12 sucks you in a little too early. Stay outside a full car length or two beyond the end of the curbing, and then turn. Use this black line on the outside as your guide. Don't drive on it, drive inside it. But go all the way down that hill before you turn in. The road goes uphill. The grip is great right when you turn in. The grip gets terrible when you go over that hump about 2/3 of the way through, which is why I recommend a stable setup for turn 12. And guess what? The finish line is right after that. I'm tired of listening to my voice, Tom. You want to do some data there?
All right. Yeah. So, just a couple of things to keep in mind here that we've talked a lot about setup through the Q&A. We've also talked a little bit about setup from the standpoint of, this track requires potentially a softer type of, on the scale of softer versus harder. This is a softer setup type of track to allow for some of those curves and things like that. Obviously, you have to balance it with the type of transitions you need left to right, because there is a lot of switchbacks. But here is some information that you'll be able to find on the Behind the Zoom portion of the Mazda Motorsports website. Is a great piece, data analysis piece here that thanks to Joel Miller for bringing on board there. And also some kind of takeaway tips from a setup standpoint. Thinking about highlighting a couple aspects of it, we really focus on where can we make up the most time. Well, typically those are in the high-speed corners, not necessarily always, off of obvious things like entering onto the longest back straightaway, but things like turn 1, where we can keep carrying a lot of speed through the corner. So that rear security for turn 1, so that the car feels planted and stable, very important. Other types of things that you can, again, all this information is on the Mazda Motorsports website, and you can pull up and take a look at. But as you balance certain things to make the car work, generalizing, you're going to find that you want to make the car turn right a little better than you do left, because predominantly right-hand corners. So if you have things like crossweights, like you'd adjust in a spec Miata, you'd want to consider it typically a turn right a little bit better than left. And that'll also help sometimes with keeping the car more stable for you in some of those other corners. So it all is a balance, but there are some tricks and tips in there for you to look over. And I think that kind of brings it to our last little bit here.
Thanks, Tom. And I'm going to go to MazdaMotorsports.com and read this article myself because I don't remember it. But we mentioned some of that ourselves already in the talk, right? Some of those ideas about drafting, and that'll be cool. So please do have a look at that. That's actually me in the 26 with Matt Pombo in the 25 at Daytona this year, the very first time I went out on track. And those MX-5s, Matt is a fearless bump drafter, having grown up and raced in spec Miata for many years, whereas I was coming from a lot of World Challenge and GT racing where you don't bump draft. And so as we go around the banking, bouncing around with him pushing on me, I'm thinking, is this going to work? Is he going to just lift me right off the pavement? Because it could happen. But for MX-5s, it works really well, and actually all Miatas, because they have these nice round bumpers. So they can't jump under and lift the car ahead off the road. That can happen. Bump drafting is something to approach very carefully on banked corners like Daytona, high bank corners. But we'll have to have a look at that.
Randy and Tom, thank you guys so much for spending your evenings helping out on this whole campaign for the second half of the racing season. And thank you everybody for joining tonight. And if you joined before, thank you as well. I just want a couple quick notes before we let you go. And again, we appreciate the extra time that you've given us here. Road Atlanta certainly is a complex track that has a lot of great information to be shared. If you guys are interested in AIM data, we are going to have a webinar with one of our behind the Zoom drivers. It's to be determined. I haven't yet asked any of them, but I plan to remedy that with the National Training Manager, Roger Cadell. We'll have the information out in next Tuesday's weekly e-newsletter, but plan on, if you are interested, the same time frame on November 12th. Just wanted to say thank you guys again for all your support. We're certainly trying to provide any value that we can to you guys and gals. So if you have any feedback, for us, we would certainly appreciate it. We're going to consistently make adjustments, and the best way for us to do that is from the feedback. So you'll get a survey here right when I close this thing down, and just an overall satisfaction-based survey. But if you do want to send me any information or any thoughts, feedback, that'd be great. I'm actually stopping the recording right now.